The whispers started the moment Penelope Bradford stepped off the stagecoach in Pecos, Texas, her left hand clutching a carpet bag while her right arm hung stiff and scarred at her side, the evidence of a fire that had taken everything she once knew. It was April 1878, and the desert heat already shimmered across the dusty Main Street, making the wooden storefronts waver like mirages. Penelope kept her eyes down, knowing what people saw when they looked at her. The burns stretched from her right shoulder down to her wrist, puckered skin that told a story she never wanted to repeat. Her honey-colored hair was cropped short on one side where the flames had stolen it, and though she was only 22 years old, the townspeople who paused to stare saw only damaged goods. "Poor thing," one woman muttered to another outside the general store. "What'd she expect to find here? No man will want a woman like that." Penelope's jaw tightened, but she kept walking toward the boarding house. She had heard it all before, back in San Antonio where the fire had destroyed her family's home and taken her parents and younger brother. The community there had been kind at first, offering sympathy and Christian charity. But when the banker's son had broken their engagement 3 days after seeing her injuries, the sympathy had curdled into pity. Every woman in town looked at her with relief that it was not them, and every man looked away entirely. She had come to Pecos because her Aunt Martha ran the boarding house, and because starting over in a town where no one knew her story felt like her only option. At least here, she would only be pitied for what they could see, not for everything she had lost. The boarding house stood at the edge of town, a 2-story structure with a wraparound porch that had seen better days. Aunt Martha burst through the door before Penelope could knock, her round face creased with worry and welcome. "Sweet girl, you made it." Martha wrapped her in a hug that smelled like fresh bread and lye soap. Come in, come in. You must be exhausted from the journey." The boarding house was clean but sparse, with 6 rooms for rent upstairs and a common dining area below. Martha led Penelope to a small room at the back that looked out over the scrubland stretching toward distant mountains. "It is not much, but it is yours for as long as you need it," Martha said, squeezing Penelope's good hand. "I am glad you are here, dear, truly." Penelope managed a smile, the first real one in months. "Thank you, Aunt Martha. I will help with the house, earn my keep." "We will discuss that after you have rested. There is water in the basin and supper will be at 6. Martha paused at the door. "Penelope, this is a good town. People here mind their own business mostly. You will find your place." After Martha left, Penelope sank onto the narrow bed and allowed herself a moment of weakness. Her right arm ached, as it always did when she was tired or stressed. The scars pulled tight when she moved certain ways, limiting her range of motion. She had learned to compensate with her left hand, but nothing felt natural anymore. Nothing felt whole. The sunset painted the mountains purple and gold, and Penelope watched until the light faded completely. Tomorrow she would begin again. Tomorrow she would prove she was more than what the fire had left behind. The next morning, Penelope woke to the sound of men's voices downstairs. Martha ran a respectable establishment, but she rented rooms to cowboys, ranch hands, and anyone passing through who needed a clean bed and hot meals. Penelope dressed carefully in a high-necked blue calico dress that covered most of her scars, though the ones on her hand were impossible to hide. She found Martha in the kitchen, already kneading dough for the day's bread. "Morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" "Well enough." Penelope tied an apron around her waist. "What can I do to help?" They fell into an easy rhythm, and Penelope was grateful for work that kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. The boarding house residents came and went throughout the morning. Most were polite, tipping their hats and offering brief greetings. None stared too long at her scars, though she caught them looking when they thought she was not paying attention. It was near noon when Martha mentioned him. "We have a new guest arriving this afternoon. Comes down from the mountains twice a year for supplies. Stays about a week each time." "A trapper?" Penelope asked, rolling out pie dough. "Something like that. Declan Jamison. Keeps to himself mostly, but he is always respectful. Good man, just prefers solitude." Martha's eyes held a speculative gleam that made Penelope nervous. "He is about your age, I would guess. 26 or 27. "Aunt Martha," Penelope said firmly, "I am not looking for a husband." "I did not say you were. I am just making conversation." But the smile on Martha's face suggested otherwise. Penelope was in the dining room setting tables for supper when the door opened, and a mountain of a man ducked through the frame. He had to be well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they nearly spanned the doorway. His hair was dark and thick, falling past his collar in waves that suggested he cut it himself without much concern for style. A beard covered his jaw, neatly trimmed but full, and his skin was tanned from constant sun exposure. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were a startling gray-blue, like storm clouds over water, and they took in everything with a quiet intensity that made her breath catch. "Madam," he said, removing his hat to reveal more of that thick, dark hair. His voice was deep and rough from disuse, as if he was not accustomed to speaking often. "You must be Mr. Jamison," Penelope managed, forcing herself not to hide her scarred hand behind her back. "Let him see. Let him look away like everyone else." Better to know now what he thought of damaged goods, but Declan Jamison did not look away. His eyes met hers directly and he nodded. "I am, and you are, Penelope Bradford, Martha's niece. I am helping with the boarding house now. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Bradford." He moved into the room with a fluid grace surprising for a man his size, all corded muscle and controlled power. He wore buckskin trousers and a simple cotton shirt that strained across his chest and arms. Everything about him spoke of strength and self-sufficiency. Martha bustled in from the kitchen. "Declan, right on time as always. Your usual room is ready upstairs on the left." "Much obliged, Martha." He pulled a leather pouch from his belt and handed over payment. "I will be needing supplies come Friday, same as always, of course. Penelope will help me prepare everything." Martha shot her niece a meaningful look. Declan glanced at Penelope again, that steady gaze that did not shy away from her scars or linger on them with pity. "That would be appreciated," he said simply, then headed upstairs with his pack slung over one massive shoulder. "Well," Martha said once he was out of earshot, "what do you think?" "I think he is very tall," Penelope replied carefully, trying to still the unexpected flutter in her chest. "And that you are meddling, Aunt Martha." Martha's laugh was unrepentant. "Maybe a little, but you cannot blame me for hoping. You deserve happiness, sweet girl. Do not let what happened steal that from you too." That evening, all 6 rooms were occupied, and the dining table was crowded with men eager for Martha's cooking. Penelope helped serve, grateful that the work kept her from having to make conversation. She felt eyes on her throughout the meal but could not tell whose. It was not until she was clearing plates that Declan spoke to her again. "That was fine cooking, Miss Bradford. Did you help prepare it?" She was so startled by the direct question that she nearly dropped the stack of dishes she held. "The biscuits were mine. Everything else was Aunt Martha's work." "Best biscuits I have had in 6 months," he said, and something in his expression suggested he was not just being polite. "You have a talent." "Thank you." She could feel heat rising in her cheeks and hated herself for it. Compliments were not something she received anymore. "That is kind of you to say." He stood, unfolding to his full impressive height, and picked up several plates from the table. "Kitchen through here." "You do not have to do that," Penelope protested. "Neither do you, but here we are." There was the ghost of a smile beneath that beard, barely visible but undeniably there. They worked in silence, clearing the table while Martha supervised from the kitchen. Penelope was acutely aware of how small she felt next to Declan, how his presence seemed to fill the space around him. But it was not threatening. If anything, there was something reassuring about his solidity, his quiet competence. "How long have you been coming to Pecos?" she asked as they stacked dishes by the wash basin. "5 years, give or take. Started trapping in the Guadalupe Mountains after the war." He said it matter-of-factly, not with the haunted tone many veterans carried. "Town has grown since then. You not get lonely, up in the mountains by yourself?" He considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But there is a different kind of lonely that comes from being surrounded by people who do not understand you. I prefer the mountains." Penelope understood that more than she wanted to admit. "Yes," she said softly. "I can see how that would be true." Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. A shared understanding of what it meant to exist on the margins, to find peace in solitude because connection had proven too painful. Martha broke the moment by shooing them both out of the kitchen. "I will finish up here." "Declan, there is coffee if you want it." "Penelope, dear, you have been on your feet all day. Go rest." But Penelope found herself following Declan to the porch instead, drawn by an impulse she did not quite understand. He settled onto the steps, long legs stretched out, and looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the space beside him. "Of course." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the town settling in for the night. Dogs barking in the distance, the murmur of voices from the saloon down the street, the creak of wagon wheels. "Your aunt mentioned you came from San Antonio," Declan said eventually. Penelope tensed, waiting for the inevitable questions. But he did not press, just let the statement hang there. She could respond or not, her choice entirely. "There was a fire," she heard herself say, "6 months ago. I was the only one who made it out." Her hand went unconsciously to her scarred arm. "This is what I have to show for surviving. I am sorry for your loss." Declan's voice was gentle, but not pitying. "That is a heavy thing to carry. Everyone back home looked at me like I was broken, like the fire had ruined me for any kind of normal life." The words poured out before she could stop them. "The man I was supposed to marry decided he could not be with someone who looked like this. Said it would be too hard for his family to accept. Then he was a fool." Penelope turned to stare at Declan. "What? Any man who would let scars determine a woman's worth is a fool." He met her gaze steadily. "Those marks mean you survived something that would have killed most people. That takes strength, courage. Those are not qualities to be ashamed of." Tears pricked her eyes and she blinked them back fiercely. "You do not know me. For all you know, I am exactly what they say. Damaged goods, nothing left to give." "I do not know you well," Declan agreed. "But I know what I see. And I see a woman who is here, still standing, still working, still living despite everything that tried to stop her. That tells me more than any scar ever could." Something cracked open in Penelope's chest, a tight knot of pain and shame she had been carrying for months. She turned away before he could see her cry, but a tear escaped anyway, rolling down her cheek. A large, calloused hand appeared in her peripheral vision, offering a handkerchief. She took it gratefully, pressing it to her eyes. "I am sorry," she managed. "I do not usually fall apart on strangers. We all need to fall apart sometimes. Better than keeping it locked inside until it poisons you." Declan's voice was still gentle, patient. "And maybe we are not entirely strangers anymore," she laughed, a watery sound that was half sob. "No, I suppose not." They stayed on the porch until the stars filled the sky completely, talking about small things. He told her about the mountains, the wildlife he tracked, the peace of winter snow. She told him about learning to cook with her mother, about the garden they had kept in San Antonio, about her dreams of opening a bakery someday. It was the first real conversation she had had since the fire, the first time she felt like a person instead of an object of pity. And when Declan finally stood to head inside, he offered her his hand to help her up. She took it with her scarred one, and he did not flinch or hesitate, just pulled her gently to her feet. "Thank you," she said, "for listening, for not looking at me the way everyone else does. I will see you tomorrow, Penelope." The way he said her name with that rough voice and careful pronunciation made her heart skip. She watched him disappear inside, then stood on the porch a moment longer, feeling something she had not felt in months: hope. The next few days fell into a pattern. Penelope worked alongside Martha during the day, cooking and cleaning and managing the boarding house. Declan spent his time in town conducting business, ordering supplies, and occasionally disappearing for hours at a time. But every evening, he found his way to the porch where Penelope sat after supper, and they talked. She learned that he had grown up in Tennessee, that he had fought for the Union during the war despite his family's Confederate sympathies, that he had lost his parents to fever and his only brother at Shiloh. The mountains had called to him after the war, offering solitude and purpose when the world felt too broken to navigate. He learned that she had been a schoolteacher before the fire, that she loved books and poetry, that she missed music most of all since her damaged hand made playing piano impossible now. "I used to play every evening," she told him one night, flexing her scarred fingers. "Beethoven, Mozart, some Chopin. My mother said I had a gift for it. Now I can barely make a fist." Declan watched her struggle with the movement, his expression thoughtful. "Can you still read music? Of course. That is not something you forget. Then the gift is not gone, just changed." He stood and offered his hand. "Come with me tomorrow. There is something I want to show you." "Where?" "It is a surprise." "Do you trust me?" Penelope looked at this mountain of a man with his gentle eyes and patient presence and realized that she did. Against all logic and self-preservation, she trusted him. Yes. The next morning, Declan borrowed 2 horses from the livery and helped Penelope mount. She had not ridden since the fire, and her right arm protested the unfamiliar motion, but she gritted her teeth and settled into the saddle. They rode east out of Pecos, into the scrubland that gradually gave way to rocky hills. Declan led them to a canyon she had never seen before, where a small stream cut through red rock and cottonwood trees provided shade. "This is beautiful," Penelope breathed, taking in the sweep of landscape. "Listen," Declan said. She closed her eyes and heard it. The wind moving through the canyon created a low, musical hum. The water over stones added a rhythmic percussion. Birds called in patterns that rose and fell like melody. It was a symphony of natural sounds, wild and untamed and perfect. "The mountains taught me that music is not just what humans make," Declan said quietly. "It is everywhere if you know how to listen. You did not lose your gift, Penelope. You just have to find new ways to hear it." She opened her eyes to find him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know me. I am just some broken woman staying at your boarding house." Declan dismounted and came to stand beside her horse, looking up at her with those storm cloud eyes. "You keep calling yourself broken. I do not see that. I see a woman who survived hell and came out the other side still whole where it matters." He placed a hand over his chest. "Here. In the parts that really count." Declan. She did not know what to say, how to process the way he looked at her like she was something precious. "I know what it is to feel like you do not fit anywhere," he continued. To have people look at you and see only what you lack, not what you are. But when I look at you, I see strength, intelligence, courage, a stubborn refusal to let tragedy define you. His hand moved to cover hers on the saddle horn. I see a woman I want to know better, if you will let me. Penelope's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. Everyone says I am damaged goods, that no man would want me. Then everyone is wrong. His fingers tightened around hers, gentle but firm. I want every broken piece you have to give, Penelope Bradford. The scars, the pain, the fear, all of it. Because it is all part of who you are, and who you are is remarkable. A sob caught in her throat, but this time it was from relief rather than sorrow. I do not know how to do this, how to let someone in again. Neither do I. Declan's smile was crooked, vulnerable. We will figure it out together, if you want to. She looked down at this man who saw past everything the world told him to see, who found beauty in her brokenness, who offered acceptance without conditions. And she made a choice. Yes, she whispered, I want to. He helped her down from the horse, and for a moment, they stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, smell the pine and leather scent of him. His hands lingered at her waist, and she let herself lean into his strength. I am going to court you properly, Declan said, his voice rumbling in his chest. I will come back in 6 months, and I will write to you while I am in the mountains. When I return, if you still feel the same, I am going to marry you, if you will have me. 6 months is a long time, Penelope said, even as her heart soared. I need to finish the trapping season, settle some business up north, and you need time to heal to be sure this is what you want. His thumb traced gentle circles on her waist. I will not rush you into anything. You have been through too much already. What if you change your mind? What if you decide I am not worth waiting for? Declan cupped her face with one large hand, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. That will not happen. I know my own mind, Penelope. I have been alone for 5 years because I never met anyone worth staying for, worth changing my life for, until now. She kissed him then, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. It was gentle and tentative, a question more than a statement. He answered by wrapping his arms around her and deepening the kiss, showing her without words what she meant to him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Penelope felt branded by his touch, claimed in a way that had nothing to do with ownership and everything to do with choice. I will wait for you, she promised, however long it takes. They spent the rest of the day in the canyon, talking and planning and stealing kisses that grew gradually more confident. Declan told her about his cabin in the mountains, the life he had built there. Penelope shared her dreams of that bakery, of creating something beautiful with her own hands despite their limitations. You could do both, Declan suggested. The mountains have plenty of space, and travelers passing through always need provisions. You could bake, sell to the trading posts. You would want that, a wife who works. I would want a wife who is happy. If baking makes you happy, then that is what matters. He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. I do not need someone to just keep house and bear children, Penelope. I need a partner. Someone who challenges me, who has her own dreams and ambitions. That is you. She let herself imagine it. A cabin in the mountains, a kitchen filled with the smell of fresh bread, this solid man coming home to her every night. A life built on mutual respect and genuine affection instead of social obligation. It seemed too good to be true. But when she looked up at Declan, saw the certainty in his eyes, she let herself believe it might be possible. They returned to Pecos as the sun was setting, both reluctant to end the day. Martha was waiting on the porch, her expression knowing. Had a good ride? She asked innocently. Very good, Declan replied, helping Penelope dismount. His hands lingered at her waist, and she felt the promise in his touch. That evening, Declan sat her down and showed her letters of credit from the bank, maps of his property, proof that he was a man of means despite his rough appearance. "I want you to know what you would be getting into," he explained. "I am not wealthy, but I have saved well. The cabin is solid, the land is mine clear. You would never want for necessities." "I do not care about money," Penelope said. "I care about you. I know. But you deserve to make an informed choice." He traced the scars on her hand with gentle fingers. "You deserve everything good this life can offer, Penelope, and I want to be the man who gives it to you." Declan left Pecos 3 days later, heading back to the mountains for the summer trapping season. Penelope stood on the porch and watched him ride away, her heart aching even as it sang with happiness. He had promised to write, to return in 6 months. She had to trust that promise. "He is a good man," Martha said, coming to stand beside her. "I have known Declan Jamison for 5 years, and I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." "I am afraid," Penelope admitted. "Afraid this is too good to be real, that something will go wrong." Martha squeezed her shoulder. "Love is always a risk, sweet girl, but some risks are worth taking." The first letter arrived 2 weeks later, brought by a trader passing through. Declan's handwriting was cramped and practical, but the words made Penelope's heart race. "Dear Penelope, I think of you constantly. The mountains are beautiful this time of year, but they feel empty knowing you are not here to see them. I hope you are well, that your aunt is treating you kindly, that you are finding peace in Pecos. I count the days until I can see you again. Yours, Declan." Penelope read the letter until she had it memorized, then wrote back immediately. She told him about her days helping Martha, about the regular customers at the boarding house, about her attempts to bake new recipes with her limited hand mobility. She told him she missed him, that she thought of him every time she looked at the mountains, that she was counting days too. The letters became a lifeline. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork, a new one would arrive. Declan wrote about his work, the animals he tracked, the changing seasons in the high country. But mostly he wrote about his plans for their future, the additions he was making to the cabin, the things he wanted to show her when she came to live with him. Penelope wrote back about her growing confidence in the kitchen, about the regular customers who had stopped seeing her as damaged and started seeing her as simply Penelope. She wrote about her healing, both physical and emotional, about learning to accept her scars as part of her story rather than the whole of it. Summer turned to fall, and Penelope found herself transformed. The constant work had strengthened her damaged arm, increasing her range of motion. The acceptance she found in Pecos had rebuilt her confidence, and Declan's unwavering devotion, expressed through letters and promises, had healed wounds deeper than any fire could burn. Martha watched the transformation with satisfaction. "You are blooming again, sweet girl. Like a flower after rain." "I feel alive again," Penelope admitted. "For the first time since the fire, I feel like myself." "That is Declan's doing, and yours for being brave enough to accept what he offered." The town had noticed too. Men started tipping their hats with respect rather than pity. Women invited her to quilting circles and church socials. When Penelope mentioned that she was waiting for Declan Jamison to return so they could marry, the reaction was universally positive. "That is a good match," the general store owner said. "Declan is solid as they come, and you have brought him out of his shell from what I hear. First time in 5 years he has written letters regular like." November arrived with cooler temperatures and anticipation that made Penelope's skin tingle. Declan's last letter had said he would return by the 20th, in time for Thanksgiving. She counted the days, then the hours. He rode into Pecos on November 19th, a day early and covered in trail dust. Penelope was in the kitchen when she heard Martha's delighted cry. And then she was running, propriety forgotten, bursting out the front door to find him dismounting. Declan caught her in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing. He had grown his hair even longer and his beard was fuller, but his eyes held the same warmth she remembered. "You are early," she gasped, clinging to his shoulders. Could not wait another day. He set her down but did not let go, drinking in the sight of her. "God, Penelope, you are even more beautiful than I remembered. I have scars, short hair, a damaged arm. You have fire in your eyes and strength in your spine and a smile that makes my chest ache." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, making promises with his mouth that his body echoed. "And you are mine if you still want to be." "Yes," she said against his lips. "Yes, always yes." They were married 3 days later in the small church on the edge of town. Penelope wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her sew, with long sleeves that covered her scars but did not hide them entirely. She had learned to carry her marks with pride, understanding that they were proof of survival. Declan wore a new suit that strained across his shoulders, his hair tied back and his beard freshly trimmed. When the preacher asked if he took Penelope Bradford to be his lawfully wedded wife, his "I do" rang through the church like a vow and a celebration combined. The kiss he gave her at the altar was chaste but full of promise, and when he took her hand to lead her back down the aisle, he held her scarred one high for everyone to see. The wedding supper was held at the boarding house, with Martha serving her finest cooking and half the town in attendance. Penelope had worried that people would whisper about the match, about the damaged woman and the hermit mountain man. But all she saw was genuine happiness for them both. "You give those gossiping fools back in San Antonio something to think about," one of the older women told her, squeezing her hand. "Found yourself a real man who sees your worth. That is more than most women get." When the celebration finally wound down, Declan swept Penelope up in his arms and carried her upstairs to the room he had rented, ignoring her laughing protests that she could walk perfectly well. "Humor me," he rumbled, kicking the door shut behind them. "I have been waiting 6 months to have you alone." He set her down gently, then just looked at her for a long moment. Penelope felt suddenly shy under his intense gaze. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I am the luckiest man alive." He reached out and slowly began unpinning her hair, letting the golden strands fall around her shoulders. "That everyone who said you were damaged goods was blind and stupid. That I get to spend the rest of my life proving to you how extraordinary you are." His fingers found the buttons of her dress and she caught his hand. "Declan, my scars, they are worse without clothes. The fire damage covers most of my right side. Penelope." He waited until she met his eyes. "I do not care. Show me every inch of you, scarred or not. I want all of you." She helped him undress her, revealing skin that was a patchwork of smooth and damaged, normal and puckered. Declan touched every inch with reverent hands, tracing the worst of the scars with gentle fingers. "Beautiful," he murmured. "Every part of you." When he pulled off his own shirt, Penelope saw he had scars too. A bullet wound on his shoulder, what looked like a knife scar across his ribs, smaller marks from a life lived rough and dangerous. "We match," she said, running her hand over his chest. "We do." He pulled her close, skin to skin, and the contact was electric. In all the ways that matter. Their first night together was tender and passionate, Declan showing her with his body what his words had promised. He was careful of her injuries, adjusting his strength to her needs, making sure every touch brought pleasure rather than pain. And Penelope discovered that her damaged body was still capable of feeling everything, of responding to his touch with an intensity that left her breathless. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with her head on his chest, she felt completely safe for the first time since the fire. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I do not think I said it before, but I do. I love you, Declan Jamison." His arms tightened around her. "I love you too, Penelope. My wife. My whole, perfect wife." They stayed in Pecos for a week, giving Penelope time to say goodbye to Martha and prepare for the journey to Declan's mountain cabin. Martha cried when they left but insisted she was happy. "You visit me next spring," she ordered, hugging Penelope tight. "I want to hear all about mountain life." "I promise," Penelope said, fighting her own tears. "And thank you, Aunt Martha, for everything." The journey into the Guadalupe Mountains took 3 days of hard riding. Declan led them along trails that would have been invisible to Penelope, through landscapes so beautiful they took her breath away. They camped at night under stars so bright and numerous it felt like heaven had come to earth. "This is your world," Penelope said on the second night, watching Declan build their fire with practiced efficiency. "I am glad you are sharing it with me." "It is our world now," he corrected, settling beside her and pulling her against his warmth. "Everything I have is yours." The cabin appeared on the third afternoon, nestled in a valley where a stream ran clear and pine trees provided shelter. It was larger than Penelope had expected, built from whole logs and featuring actual glass windows, a luxury in the wilderness. "You built this yourself?" she asked in awe. "Over several years, I kept adding to it." He helped her dismount, then gestured to a new addition on the eastern side. "That is for you, your bakery. I built it this summer with a proper stone oven and good ventilation. The trader routes pass through here regular. You can sell to them, to anyone who needs provisions." Penelope walked into the new section and found everything she could have dreamed of. A large work table at the perfect height, shelves for supplies, and yes, a beautiful stone oven that would bake evenly and hold heat well. "Declan," she breathed, "this is too much. It is not enough." He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I want you to be happy here, Penelope. I want you to have your dreams." She turned in his arms and kissed him hard. "I am happy. Happier than I ever thought possible." They settled into mountain life with surprising ease. Declan taught Penelope how to track game, how to read weather patterns, how to survive in the wilderness. She taught him that solitude was different from loneliness, that sharing his space with someone who understood him only enhanced the peace he had found. The bakery became exactly what Declan had predicted. Traders passing through were grateful for fresh bread and pastries, paying well for provisions that would keep on the trail. Word spread, and soon Penelope had regular customers, people who timed their routes to pass by the cabin. "You are building a reputation," Declan told her proudly, watching her package up an order of biscuits for a group of trappers. "Best baker in the territory." Working with her damaged hand remained a challenge, but Penelope had adapted. She used her left hand for most tasks, employing her right only for support or simple motions. It was slower than before the fire, but the results were just as good. Winter came early to the mountains, bringing snow that transformed the landscape into a wonderland of white. Penelope had never experienced such profound quiet, such complete isolation. There were days when they saw no one but each other, snowed in by storms that raged outside while they stayed warm by the fire. Those were her favorite days. Declan would read aloud from the books they owned while she knitted or mended clothes. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. They made love in the afternoon, with sunlight streaming through ice-covered windows, discovering new ways to bring each other pleasure. "I never knew marriage could be like this," Penelope confessed one evening, lying in Declan's arms while snow fell outside. So easy, so right. That is because we are well matched. He kissed the top of her head. We both know what it is to be alone, to be judged and found wanting by the world. We both value peace over crowds, substance over show. We fit, Penelope. Yes, she agreed. We do. Spring arrived gradually, the snow melting to reveal new green growth. Penelope discovered she was pregnant in April, when morning sickness made baking nearly impossible. Declan was simultaneously terrified and delighted. "Are you happy?" he asked, one hand splayed protectively over her still flat stomach. "Terrified," she admitted. "But yes, happy. Are you?" "More than I can say." He pulled her close. "You are giving me a family again, Penelope, a reason to build a future instead of just surviving day to day." The pregnancy was difficult. Penelope's damaged side ached constantly as her body changed, and there were days when she could barely move. Declan hovered like an anxious bear, doing everything he could to ease her discomfort. "I am not made of glass," she told him after he insisted on carrying her to bed for the third time in a week. "No, you are made of steel and stubbornness," he agreed. "But you are also carrying our child, and I will be damned if I let you suffer when I can help." Their son was born in November, exactly a year after their wedding. The birth was long and hard, with only Declan there to help since they were snowed in and could not reach town. He supported Penelope through every contraction, never flinching even when she screamed and cursed him for getting her pregnant. When the baby finally arrived, red-faced and wailing, Declan cut the cord with shaking hands and placed him on Penelope's chest with such tenderness it made her cry all over again. "A boy," she whispered, exhausted and euphoric. "We have a son, Declan. He is perfect." Declan's voice was rough with emotion. "You are perfect. Thank you, Penelope. Thank you for this." They named him Daniel after Declan's brother who had died in the war. He had Declan's dark hair and Penelope's eyes, and he nursed with a fierce determination that suggested he would be as stubborn as both his parents. Motherhood transformed Penelope in ways she had not expected. The scars that had once made her feel broken now felt like armor, proof that she was strong enough to protect this tiny life. When Daniel fussed, she soothed him with songs she remembered from her own childhood. When he needed feeding, she managed despite the awkwardness of her damaged arm. Declan was a devoted father, patient and gentle with his son. He carved toys with those big hands, held Daniel for hours when he was colicky, changed diapers without complaint. Watching him with their child made Penelope fall in love with him all over again. "You are a natural at this," she told him one evening, watching him rock Daniel to sleep. "I am terrified every second," Declan admitted, "but I would not trade it for anything." They made the journey to Pecos when Daniel was 3 months old, wanting to introduce him to Martha. The older woman wept with joy, holding her great-nephew with shaking hands. "He is beautiful," she declared. "And you look wonderful, Penelope. Motherhood suits you." "Mountain life suits me," Penelope corrected. "I never thought I would say this, but I am grateful for the fire. If it had not happened, I would never have come here. Never have met Declan, never have this life." Martha's eyes were knowing. "You have healed, sweet girl, not just your body but your heart. That is what love does." They stayed in Pecos for 2 weeks, and Penelope was struck by how much had changed. The town that had once seemed like a last refuge now felt small and confining. Her real home was in the mountains, with Declan and Daniel, and the life they were building together. The years flowed by in a rhythm of seasons and milestones. Daniel grew into a sturdy boy who loved helping his father track game and his mother bake bread. Penelope's bakery business flourished, providing a steady income that supplemented Declan's trapping. They added on to the cabin twice, creating more space for their growing family. A daughter arrived when Daniel was 3. They named her Margaret after Penelope's mother, but everyone called her Maggie from the start. She had her father's storm-cloud eyes and her mother's stubborn determination, a combination that promised interesting teenage years. Penelope's scars faded over time, though they never disappeared entirely, but they no longer defined her. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a wife, a mother, a businesswoman, a survivor. The fire was part of her story, but not the whole story. Declan remained the same solid presence he had always been, aging gracefully into his 30s and then 40s. His hair went gray at the temples, and lines appeared around his eyes from squinting in the sun. But his strength never diminished, nor did his devotion to his family. "I still cannot believe you wanted me," Penelope told him one night, 20 years into their marriage. They were sitting on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold while their children played in the yard. Daniel was 20 now, courting a girl from one of the neighboring ranches. Maggie was 17, already showing signs of her mother's baking talent. "Why would I not?" Declan asked, genuinely confused by the question. "Because I was damaged goods. Everyone said so." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. The scars were still there, faded but visible. "You were never damaged, Penelope. You were tested by fire and came through it." "That is not the same thing at all. They said no man would want me. Then they were fools." He brought her scarred hand to his lips, kissing each knuckle. "I wanted every broken piece you thought you had to give, and what I discovered was that you were not broken at all, just changed. Just stronger." Penelope leaned against his solid warmth, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Declan Jamison. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked away. I love you too, my wife, my partner, my whole, perfect Penelope." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set completely and stars began to emerge. In the distance, they could hear Daniel laughing at something Maggie said, the sound of young voices full of hope and possibility. Martha visited every summer until she passed away peacefully in her sleep at 73. She died knowing that Penelope had found everything she deserved, that the niece she had welcomed to Pecos had bloomed into a woman of strength and substance. The bakery became famous throughout the territory. Travelers would go out of their way to stop at the Jamison cabin, knowing they would find the best bread and pastries in the region. Penelope trained Maggie in the craft, passing on skills and recipes, creating a legacy that would outlast her. Daniel married his sweetheart when he was 22 and built his own cabin a few miles from his parents. He and his wife gave Penelope and Declan 4 grandchildren, all of them growing up wild and free in the mountains. Maggie waited until she was 25 to marry, choosing a trader who appreciated her business sense as much as her beauty. They settled near Pecos, and Maggie opened her own bakery there, building on the reputation her mother had created. Declan and Penelope grew old together in the mountains they loved. His hair went completely white, and her scars became barely visible against aging skin. But their love never diminished, never faded. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and mutual respect. On their 40th wedding anniversary, Declan surprised Penelope with a gift. He had commissioned a portrait from a traveling artist, showing them both as they had been when they first met. Penelope's scars were visible in the painting, but the artist had captured something else too. The strength in her eyes, the determination in her jaw, the way she looked at Declan like he hung the moon. "This is how I saw you that first day," Declan told her, his voice rougher with age but still full of warmth. "Not damaged, not broken, just extraordinary." Penelope studied the portrait through tears. "I was so afraid back then, afraid no one would ever want me, and I wanted every piece." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder the way he had done 1,000 times before. "I still do. Every scar, every fear, every dream, all of it. Always." They hung the portrait in the main room of the cabin, where it watched over family gatherings and quiet evenings alike. And when people asked about the scars visible in the painting, Penelope would tell the story, not of loss and damage, but of survival and strength. Of a mountain man who saw past what everyone else called broken, who wanted every piece she had to give, and who spent 40 years proving that love was not about perfection, but about acceptance. Daniel and his family took over the cabin when Penelope and Declan became too old to manage it alone. But the couple refused to leave their mountain entirely, insisting on staying in a smaller house Daniel built nearby. They spent their final years watching grandchildren and great-grandchildren play in the same meadows where they had walked, baking bread on special occasions, and sitting on the porch every evening to watch the sunset. Declan passed first, on a crisp autumn morning when the aspens were turning gold. He died in his sleep with Penelope beside him, peaceful and content. At his funeral, people came from all over the territory to pay respects to the mountain man who had been so much more than he appeared. A devoted husband, a loving father, a pillar of quiet strength. Penelope followed him 6 months later, having lost her desire to continue without her other half. She spent those final months sharing stories with her grandchildren, making sure they understood the legacy of love and acceptance that Declan had built. On the day she died, surrounded by family in the cabin she and Declan had built together, her last words were about him. "Tell him I am coming," she whispered to Daniel. "Tell him I have more pieces to give, and he is the only man who ever wanted them." She was buried beside Declan in a small cemetery they had created on their property, under pine trees with a view of the mountains they both loved. The headstones were simple, bearing only their names and dates, but everyone who knew them understood the truth. Penelope Bradford Jamison had been called damaged goods, broken, unwanted, but she had found a man who saw past the scars to the woman beneath. A man who wanted every broken piece she thought she had to give, only to discover that she was never broken at all. Just tested, tempered, and made stronger by fire. And together, they had built a love story that would echo through generations. A testament to the truth that real love sees not damage but strength, not brokenness but resilience, not scars but survival. A reminder that the right person does not fix you or complete you, but simply recognizes that you were whole all along. The bakery continued for 3 more generations, each Jamison woman learning the craft from her mother, carrying on Penelope's legacy. The cabin stood for over 100 years before finally succumbing to time and weather. But the story lived on, told and retold around campfires and dinner tables. The story of a woman the world called damaged goods, and a mountain man who wanted every broken piece she had to give. Who proved that love is not about perfection, but about seeing someone truly and choosing them anyway. Who built a life in the mountains that became a legend, not of tragedy overcome but of strength recognized and celebrated. And in the end, that was the greatest gift Declan had given Penelope. Not acceptance of her scars, but the understanding that she had never needed fixing in the first place. She had always been whole, always been worthy, always been enough. She just needed someone who could see it. And he had seen it from the very first day, in a dusty boarding house in Pecos, Texas, when their eyes met and something shifted in both their worlds. They said she was damaged goods no man wanted. But Declan Jamison had wanted every broken piece she had to give, and in wanting them, had shown her they were never broken at all. just beautiful in ways the world had not learned to see yet. Beautiful in their imperfection, their honesty, their proof that she had survived. And that survival, that strength, that refusal to let tragedy define her, had been the foundation of a love that lasted a lifetime and echoed through generations. A love built not despite scars, but inclusive of them. A love that saw the whole person and declared her perfect exactly as she was. That was the legacy Penelope and Declan left behind. Not a fortune or an empire, but a truth. That damaged goods is a lie people tell about those who have survived what they cannot imagine. That scars are not flaws but badges of honor. That the right love does not heal broken pieces because it never saw them as broken in the first place. And in the mountains of West Texas, where the Guadalupe peaks still stand watch over valleys where their descendants still live, that truth continues. Passed down through stories and examples, a reminder that we are all whole exactly as we are, scars and all. We just need eyes willing to see it and hearts brave enough to celebrate it. Declan and Penelope Jamison had those eyes and hearts. And in finding each other, they had proven that the world's judgment means nothing compared to genuine love. That one person seeing your worth is worth more than 1,000 declaring you worthless. That damaged goods is a label applied by small minds to strong survivors. They had built a life, a family, a legacy on that truth, and it stood, solid as the mountains themselves, long after they were gone. A testament to the power of love that sees clearly, accepts completely, and celebrates unconditionally. The kind of love that changes not just 2 lives, but generations of lives that follow. The kind of love that proves, beyond any doubt, that what the world calls broken is often simply strong in ways they cannot understand. And that the right person will always, always see the difference.